On March 20th, the unintended byproducts for Alchemy were updated on BDO. Since it's been about 3 years from when my last Alchemy video was uploaded, I thought it would be a fun idea to see how much Alchemy has changed since then. In this video, we'll go over what unintended byproducts are, what the changes were, along with the silver per hour of unintended byproducts that we got from our trial runs. Finally, we'll talk about the pros and cons of Alchemy compared to other things in BDO. So what are unintended byproducts in Alchemy? Unintended byproducts are random bonus items you obtain while doing Alchemy. For example, if you're making clear liquid reagents, you can come back to bonus items ranging from cheap things like pure powder reagents or some blackstones, to insanely expensive items such as sturdy alchemy stones that can be worth upwards of 400 million silver. Higher alchemy mastery also gives increased rates of these unintended byproducts. At 2000 mastery, you can get plus 3.57% chance of basic items, plus 1.92% of special items, and plus 0.23% of rare items. Unintended byproducts is one of my favorite mechanics in BDO as it gives enough base items that the silver does add up over time, but also has the big RNG drop that feeds the dopamine rush that everybody craves. So, what did they change in this update? Looking at the patch notes, we can see that they increased the probability of getting all 3 sturdy alchemy stones, Kashira stones, and Kron stones. All 3 of these are pretty big ticket items, with sturdy alchemy stones being 400 million silver each, and Kashiras plus Kron stones being used for many endgame things and around 2 to 3 mil each. They also added 3 new items, Plywood Hardener, Leather Glaze, and Mythical Spirit Powder. Both Plywood Hardener and Leather Glaze are used for manufacturing different things. Not bad items, though if the market gets saturated, they may drop in price. Mythical Spirit Powder can't be sold, but is very useful in recharging special alchemy stones such as Khan's Hearts along with Vels. The biggest change is that they removed 3 things from the pool: golden backpacks, Yona fragments, gold bars, and large Kashiras procs. The golden backpacks were nice since they were 5 mil each, but they did take up a slot every time, so this was most likely a QOL change to help new players with low inventory slots. Yona fragments actually were pretty useful, though they weren't able to be sold on the market. Finally, gold bars actually dropped pretty frequently, and you can get up to 100 million silver gold bars, though they were fairly rare. The removal of the small gold bars, which were really common to get, is interesting as it lets different items drop instead. Overall, this was probably to help alleviate some weight issues for newer players with low weight on their characters, but it does drastically change the ratios of unintended byproducts. To test the new changes, I did 10 hours of clear liquid reagents, 5 hours of wise man's bloods, and 10 hours of elixir of time. I then added all the unintended byproducts along with regular byproducts such as mysterious catalysts and counted how much silver I got in those hours. I did not include clear liquid reagents, wise man's bloods, or elixir of times in these calculations as I was only interested in how much money byproducts give. An important note that I'll discuss later is that shining powder does not proc when making clear liquid reagents, so those numbers are going to differ. To calculate the silver per hour, I imported every item I got into Excel. From the initial inventory picture, I got the name of each item and the amount I got in those 10 hours. The first data point I added was the market value of the storage, which is what the game says is the market value. Some numbers are really inconsistent as some items will show cheaper, but it helps to double check when looking at the storage market value. Some high value items like Kron stones are also marked as 0 since they can't be listed or sold to an NPC. The second data point is self-assigned value. This is my own valuation of each item. Most of these are quite conservative valuations, but they are a lot more accurate than the previous market value numbers. A lot of these numbers are simply scraped from the central market, such as oils of corruptions, fortitudes, etc. The ones that aren't max pre-orders and generally sit on the market at a stable price. The big items that I had to make my own value for was remnants of burnt spirits, mythical spirit powder, Kron stones, mysterious catalysts, ancient spirit dust, and finally unknown seeds. Remnant of burnt spirits sit max pre-ordered and can make corrupt oil of immortalities, which generally also sit at max price. I only added 2 million silver to the max price of burnt spirits, which is quite conservative, as even if we made corrupt oils of immortalities with them at this price, it would still give a lot more than average life scaling silver per hour, like around a couple billion an hour. Mythical Spirit Powder I valued pretty simply by taking the value of Spirit Stones and dividing that by the average amount of Spirit Powder that you get. Kron Stones I valued more than the average that they would cost melting costumes since they generally sit max pre-ordered. Not a lot of Kron Stones drop per hour, so this didn't affect the overall silver that much. Mysterious catalysts I valued by converting all of them to the most expensive item, which currently is Powder of Flame. If Powder of Flames for some reason drops drastically, you can expect to trade these for clear liquid reagents or pure powder reagents and take about 30% less silver. Ancient Spirit Dust I valued by dividing the price of Kaphra stones by 5 and subtracting the cost of 1 Blackstone armor. Finally, Unknown Seeds I calculated by taking the average amount of truffle mushrooms you get and multiplied that per seed. I valued truffle mushrooms around 600,000 each. I didn't take into account white truffle mushrooms as this was basically the cost of growing these truffle mushroom plants instead of other farming products, which is generally around 60 to 80 million silver. You get about 3 to 4 white truffle mushrooms a harvest, so they basically cancel out. Again, some of these valuations may not be perfect to some people, but I believe them to be pretty close and not considered to be very egregious to anyone. Having gotten all of my valuations, I then of course added them all together to get my total silver per hour. Important note is that I did not include the sturdy alchemy stones that I gotten in this calculation, as they had pretty high variance, though I will talk about them later. In my first 10 hours of clear liquid reagents, I got a total of 2.67 billion silver from only byproducts. I then did 5 hours of Wise Man's Bloods and got 1.29 billion in 5 hours, which is equivalent to 2.578 billion in 10 hours. Finally, I did 10 hours of Elixir of Time and got 2.37 billion in 10 hours. These numbers are relatively similar, ranging from about 240 to 270 mil an hour. Since these numbers didn't differ by too much, I'll talk more in depth about my first 10 hours. Just a side note here, the numbers have pretty drastically changed since getting this data, since hammers came out and people have been dumping and buying different items. This just goes to show that all of the unintended byproduct money is up to the market and can change anytime, especially since they gotten rid of golden backpacks and gold bars. So with all this data aside, this means that you can expect byproducts to give around 250 to 260 mil an hour every hour you do alchemy at 2000 mastery. This is pretty nuts, as this is on top of the silver per hour you get from doing the crafting itself. For example, if I made clear liquid reagents, which is a very basic recipe, it would give around 33 million silver an hour. But with the byproducts added in, I would be getting close to 300 million an hour, only making clear liquid reagents. Now some of you may be thinking that this is the number without tax, which is true. But even if we tax the clear liquid reagents byproduct number, which was 267 mil, we would still be getting 228 mil an hour. However, I will argue that most of these items shouldn't have tax included. If we look visually at a graph that shows the percentage that each item gives to the silver total, we can see that most of these items are items that alchemists will use and take advantage of, instead of dumping them onto the market. For example, unknown seeds make up 29% of the total, but they give you truffle mushrooms, which can be used for one of the highest XP and silver per hour items in the game, Elixir of Detections. Remnants of burnt spirits, oils, and other things like dead tree essence will also be very easily used in alchemy. I would say maybe around 30 to 40% of the items might be sold to the market, like memory fragments or mysterious catalysts if you don't use the powder flames, but that is dependent on the player. Again, even while taxed, byproducts still give upwards of 220 million an hour, which is a very good amount. Now we'll talk about sturdy alchemy stones. I didn't add them in the initial collection as they add in way too much variance to the overall numbers, but they do contribute a lot of the silver per hour to the overall alchemy sessions, which is why I'm talking about them now before my conclusions and closing thoughts. I got 1 sturdy alchemy stone for the first 10 hours, 0 in the 5 hours, and 3 in the last 10 hours for a total of 4 alchemy stones in 25 hours. Having done an additional around 30 hours of alchemy since then, I can say that sturdy alchemy stones do drop pretty consistently around every 5 to 10 hours. This can add around 40 to 80 million per hour depending on how often they drop. Even if we add 40 million to the clear liquid reagent hours, which we did drop one in, that's 300 million silver per hour pre-tax just from byproducts. I think byproducts really help make a lot of the alchemy recipes viable, especially the ones that are low in their initial silver per hour. Finally, with alchemy byproducts giving around 230 to 250 mil an hour, what is the end conclusion? To find whether or not alchemy is good, we'll compare it to a very similar life skill, cooking. Let's start with the downsides first. The downside of alchemy is of course how annoying some of the items are to get, such as fruits and traces. You would need to have a constant pre-order on the market up to supply in an extended alchemy session. Secondly, selling elixirs on the market is also a lot slower compared to cooking. Elixirs have maybe around 50k daily cells, while Valencia and Balanos meals both have 100 million cells each. This is due to another downside, which is that Guru boxes are usually a lot less valuable for alchemy. Lastly, because of how difficult it is to sell, a lot of the time the silver per hour for alchemy is less than cooking. Of course, there are things like detections which have a super high silver per hour, and if you have good timing with a nice amount of patience, you can get a lot more silver per hour. However, you don't really need those skills when cooking. Now we'll move on to the pros. Byproducts give a base 250 mil amount of silver no matter what recipe you are doing. Granted, it's not pure silver, but a lot of the items can be converted really easily, and some are even worth more than what they are priced on the market. This allows some things like clear liquid reagents to compete with fig pies, as with the byproducts included, you're getting around 300 mil an hour buying ingredients from the market and selling the things you make to the market. The second pro is that alchemy is a lot more weight efficient, which allows you to do alchemy for a lot longer without having to check back. With regular alchemy tools, you can check back every 18 minutes. With morning light alchemy tools, that gets extended to an hour, and with Supreme, it's about an hour and 45 minutes. This gives a lot more leniency and makes doing alchemy a lot easier compared to some cooking recipes. With both of these things in mind, the byproducts base and weight efficiency, this allows alchemists to compete with cooking in mass T1 recipes. For example, vinegar makes about 80 mil an hour and can be done in mass as it's very light. In comparison, you can do clear liquid reagents for about 30 mil an hour. Without byproducts, vinegar would be the clear winner, but after accounting for the 250 mil byproducts, you can make almost triple crafting clear liquid reagents. Finally, what does this all entail? The unintended byproduct changes gives alchemy a lot more viability for some of the low silver recipes. However, it still requires constant pre-orders, and the rate at which a lot of the final product sell is a lot less. I would recommend any life skiller to still do cooking a majority of the time while keeping pre-orders up for alchemy and then switching to alchemy when you get the products. However, if you want to only do one, the unintended byproducts honestly makes alchemy pretty viable and a lot more fun to do. Also, as a side note, if you are a free-to-play player, cooking is a lot more difficult since you won't have weight or the costume. While alchemy, you don't really need the costume or that much weight. Anyways, thanks for watching, guys. This video is a little bit longer, but I wanted to add in all my thoughts on alchemy for the past 3 years. Honestly though, the main thing I'll do for silver is still probably going to be cooking, but I'm a lot more interested in alchemy and will probably put a pre-order for pen clothes and do more alchemy in the future. Anyways, see you guys next time.